This just, this is a very, very emotional moment, I think, for all three of us sitting here as well as for Rhythm, because this entire culmination and this launch of this event that is happening today, actually the seeds were sown, I think, about 1 or a couple of years back in this very place, where, as you know, Raman sir is so enthusiastic about new ideas. This actually was a conversation that all four of us had, and we never actually imagined that this would actually take place, because I really want to thank.
Literally a few rooms away.
Exactly. So this is where this idea germinated, and the ideas have been converted to action. So let's hear it for all of us. Thank you for coming in such large numbers at the EBG. Right. This session that we're having has been deliberately titled as a fireside chat. There is no fire physically, but there is a lot of fire in the words and the ideas that we will discuss. Also, have you ever wondered why is it that it's always threes? EBG, 3 alphabets. ESG, 3 alphabets. 3 people only sitting here. Why are we only talking about CSR, 3? So have you ever wondered why it's always 3? And
because 2 have ditched. Sorry.
But and the reason why, and there must be a reason for that, right? And the reason is something that I think Dr. Chatterjee will talk about, is very important for us, and I think, sir, that is something that you have, you just probably mention it as an idea, but today it's being taught in management schools, the whole Chatterjee triangle, or the Chatterjee tricone, as you call it, and we'll love to hear from you on what that is. But let us put, I will set the context, and over the next 1 hour, thank you so much, Rhythm, for allowing us this chat. It's going to be very interactive. We are very, very clear that Dr. Chatterjee, despite him being the father of CSR, I am sure he also acknowledges that each of you in this room are CSR practitioners. Each of you here are CSR experts. Even if you are not, but the companies that you represent, some of them we know are setting global benchmarks. So we want to honor, each of your companies' commitments, understanding, and expertise on these 2 areas. So we know we are speaking to a very enlightened audience. We know that we're speaking to a very committed audience, and the fact that you have all come out in large numbers only tells us that your companies are committed to not only a larger Bharatiya cause, but also to a larger global cause. Okay. With that, let's try to understand, and I am a professor, but I like to, even in class, I teach sustainability by teaching Pink Floyd. Okay, so I have a slightly different take on sustainability and on CSR. And I think that Dr. Chatterjee is also one of them, because, he does not come across as a typical bureaucrat. And the reason I say this is that, each of us who are in leadership positions in CSR and sustainability, we don't require unidimensional leaders. We require leaders who are multidimensional, who are able to integrate the E, S, and G. It's never either or, it's always and.
So you want him to lead us to the stairway to heaven?
Oh, Ramanji is also a Led Zeppelin fan like me, yes. So, now let's understand, and this is a chat. We have also kept enough time for an interactive session. Like I said, it'll also be good for all of us as we create the first ever, and this is part of history for EBG Federation, as we create the first ever CSR and Sustainability Sector Committee.
It's literally.
Exactly, it is historic, so we are all part of history, and we would like to take your input, and I think that's why, thank you so much, Rhythm, for really scheduling this program this way, because the success of this initiative actually depends on each of you, because we are here to co-create. And I think that is also, sir, your vision as the chair of this committee, to have as many inputs coming in so that we can build this together. Okay, let's stick to the basics. European Business Group, okay? And Verma Saab spoke about a very, very important legislation, the CBAM. And if we were to see the reference point of CSR and sustainability, we have always had Europe as the reference point. There's no doubt about it. Today you have the CSRD, you have the CSDDD, and of course we'll talk about all of that. But I think, sir, as I said, the context, I'd also like to know from you, what were you and your team in the government of India thinking when you came up with the Bharatiya model of CSR and of course now the sustainability? What was the evolution of CSR in India, and what makes it so unique?
First of all, thank you, EBG, and thank you, Raman Bhai, for giving us this opportunity to have this little chat and to share some of our thoughts and perspectives with all of you, and to maybe clear some ideas that you may have on CSR but needed more clarification or to understand it better. And part of that would be realized if we try to understand where it began from. How did the idea come? Why did it come at all? Why was there a legislation? Did we need a legislation for CSR? I mean, what really went on behind the scenes? 10 years ago, we've now completed 10 years of CSR for the private sector, 2014 to 2024 plus. Prior to that, for 4 years, it was effective for public sector enterprises from 2010 to 2014. So in India, I say this often enough, charity began at home, because we began with our own public sector enterprises. And the guidelines for them, which were the precursor to Section 135, were directed at public sector enterprises. They became effective from the 1st of April 2010. So public sector was actually doing CSR in the formal way for 4 years prior to private sector. There were a few ideas that were brought in to our CSR system that are totally unique. They were never ever before conceived of anywhere on the planet. Most of the work on CSR, all the academic work, comes from America. All of the studies on CSR were all American. There was a little bit of influence from the UK, primarily because of John Elkington and Profit Planet people, but largely it was American. So when I began to think of what we should do for India, we had to think of an Indian model that was for India, by India, in India. And what were those items that we initially thought of that would make our legislation, make our rules so special to our country? 2 or 3 things, therefore, a few of the principles that we thought of, which were unique in nature. 1, any of you who know corporate governance or sit in any board will realize that unless a subject is elevated to board level, it is not going to get any importance. The best minds of the company must be engaged in that activity. If the minds of the board are not engaged, unless the agenda is not board driven, it will not happen. So the first thing we decided was, I think you will come to Chatterjeeisms later, the fact is, backroom to boardroom. It's not that companies were not doing CSR before. Of course many companies were doing it before. We had the whole Tata history and so many other companies. And therefore, in that sense, it was nothing new. But how do we formalize it? How do we make it strategic CSR? And that was the essence of the idea. So one was that Section 135, as you will see, elevates the CSR agenda to the boardroom. You have a CSR committee of the board, which determines the annual action plan, the budget, etc. So that was principle number 1. Second was, if you ask a company to do CSR, if you do not measure it in rupee terms, you cannot really set any agenda. Unless there is a budget for it in the company, it's not going to work. And companies did not ever budget for CSR. It was always something that happened either in the family or otherwise, and whenever you felt like, so intermittently it was happening. But now we said that you must have a certain spending minimum. And therefore the CSR law is essentially a spending law. how much did you spend? And therefore, we introduced the principle of POP, or percentage of profits, which in this case was 2%. When we had issued the guidelines for public sector, there were 4 slabs. We were talking about GST and slabs. I had the vision then to remember what you now said. Reduce it. 1 slab, 2%, that's it. So even the public sector regulation became 1 slab, 2% of your profits averaged over the last 3 years. And therefore only profitable companies do CSR. If you do not make profits, if your pockets are empty, what help will you do to the others? So there's a threshold, and only companies above that threshold are to do CSR. This was principle number 2. Now think, and this is important for what Raman said, how do you think things through? I tell corporates, spend CSR. How? How will they spend CSR 2%? They're not made for CSR. Companies are not created to do CSR. Companies are created to maximize shareholder profits and generally other things. So if they want to allocate a budget or a spend for carrying out CSR activities, who will implement it for them? Company employees are not going to go to district Satara and sit there for years implementing their CSR projects. So who will do this? And therefore, Rohan, it began to dawn on us that implementing agencies would be those NGOs in our country. India houses 3.3 million NGOs. Those are only the registered ones. Even if 10% of them are really good NGOs, and there's no lack of them, corporates would be able to reach out to them to implement their program. So this was item number 3.
So we'll end with 3 now because we're talking of 3s only.
Yes.
We'll again, we'll stick to 3.
So
and
these
that
3 principles were vitally important, and that's were the new thought processes that we began in CSR.
So I'll come to the next 3, which is a triangle.
Yeah.
Which is your favorite shape.
Sure.
I actually taught sustainability to my students using a concept called triangulating in circles. And somebody said you represent the circular economy. And circular economy is actually part of the whole triangle: ESG, sustainability, CSR, right? And we'll also understand from you, sir. Coming back to the triangle, you spoke about. Let's first understand, because often, like sir said, there was a thinking among corporates. Even a lot of corporate leaders today say, why is the government outsourcing its responsibility onto us? Is it our job to make roads? Is it our job to do healthcare? And I think, sir, you spoke about something called strategic. But before that, sir, you have conceptualized this very beautifully in what is known as the Chatterjee Trikone. So what is this Chatterjee Trikone, and what is the role of business actually through CSR? What is it that you and the government of India wanted business to do? Do you want them to do charity? Do you want them to replace NGOs? Or what is the role? Why should a company do CSR?
So this question is in 2 parts. 1, what is the Chatterjee Trikone, which explains the Indian model? And the second part is, why the legislation? I mean, what is private sector going to do with development? The first, of course, is that when you think of CSR, think of it as a triangle, at the apex of which sits government as the regulator and the facilitator. They make the rules, they make the regulations. MCA has a portal in which they have a dashboard in which they track what the country is doing. So they look at the overarching situation. But at the base of this triangle, on one side are the corporates who fund, who spend, who enable the process to go, because without money you can't do anything. They also oversee. If you give money, you would like to know that it's well spent, and therefore the entire monitoring process. And finally, when the project is over, we spent money, right?
Evaluation.
So evaluation, and in those days I used to call it evaluation. Today we use a fancy term called social impact assessment. So we try and assess what exactly is the impact that we
That
create.
is part of blinding them with science.
The third part is what I spoke about, the implementing agency, that is the NGO, which can also be a trust, it can also be a Section 8 company, it has to be a non-profit. And in this triangle, when all three parts function well, you get successful CSR. If there is a mismatch between them, it's likely that you will fail. That was part one. Part two, why is it that we thought of private companies? The answer to that is this. Can we get the private sector to contribute to the inclusive development agenda of the nation? One answer is, we are companies, we pay taxes. It's the government who must take care of the poor. The whole social sector is for the government to do it. Why should we get involved with it? And that is a line of argument. Of course, that line of argument nobody speaks about today. But when we were thinking about it in 2012 and 13, most of the corporations that we talked to all had the same thing. And why the hell are you involving us? You do your job, right? And if at all you need money, for heaven's sake, impose a 2% tax and be done with it. And we reached out to them and said, look, government doesn't need your money. All of the CSR that you will do doesn't even add up to one department of government. So you're a blip on a screen. Don't ascribe too much to yourself. But what we want you to do is become a part of the development agenda of the nation so that you will get a chance now to participate in nation building. Will you be opposed to that? And of course, then they had no answer. But we also said, why the private sector? They bring energies that are so different from government bureaucracy. I was a bureaucrat for 41 years and Sanjay is there to join the voice in me. The last mile, the innovation, agility, quickness of response, flexibility to do what needs to be done on the ground. To move government policy by 1 degree takes 10 years.
So can I, you said
Sure,
it's
please.
interactive, so if I
Yes.
can just, having said that, you still took the initiative through the government. I remember those days I was on 3 public sector boards when this whole thing started. And I said, here the government again takes the lead.
And the fact remains that if government does not, it doesn't happen. Think. Who brought management to India? Who brought management schools to India? All the IIMs were government. Who brought technology to India? All the 5 IITs were government. Government has the strength to make policy. It is for government to be innovative if they can. And once they are able to pass on that pattern in form of policy, see now how many management schools there are, a discipline unknown in the late 60s. Look at how much technology has advanced in India because of the seeds sown by government. So in a sense, government can also be a change maker. And I think that's exactly what we did there. Thank you.
So if you could take us through the initial years, we're still talking about the journey, we're also celebrating. I think we have, all of us are responsible for not celebrating this feat of the nation. India is the first country in the world to have a CSR legislation. Today, many other countries, sir, are coming up with their CSR law, and you'll be happy to know that they keep saying that the Chatterjee model, the Bharatiya model. So, and this is something that, sir, I think also Verma Saab said, and we also heard echoes of that the global south, again coming back to, sir, state and the beautiful modeling that the PSU started it, the private sector came on board. Can you? And I remember in those times, sir, you were the favorite on the dartboard of all of corporate India. So, given that we have a lot of public policy, leaders here in this room, can you also tell us something to inspire them? Because often, this is, I think the CSR legislation is being hailed as one of the best public policy to have come out from the global south, from India. It has not only been adopted, but also adapted over the last 10 years. So how do you think, did you also align, because we're talking also about European Union, I mean, all these companies today, of course, they all bleed for India, they think about India, but at some point, so they have to also think of the European markets. So how do you think that after 10 years, the CSR legislation, is it limiting for a business? Is it too compliance driven? What does the father of CSR see as the roadmap ahead? And how do you think it is linked to sustainability, which is becoming an emerging agenda for the world?
Again, Rohan, your question is in two parts. One is Indian, one is international. India needs development. All of development perhaps can't be done by government alone. And initially the thought process for CSR was, it is for Indian companies to do only in India. To try and assist, maybe what I might call supplement and complement the efforts of government in working for the disadvantaged, the poor, the voiceless, the marginalized. And that's the center of all CSR. If you look at Schedule 7, all the items.
So what is the Schedule 7, sir?
So many asked me then that, Dr. Chatterjee, you're giving CSR to India. But none of the sections or rules is CSR defined. Many of you are lawyers. If you open an act, what does every act begin with? Definitions. Section 135 has no definitions. And the reason why I didn't define it, because I found that definitions are circumscribing. They are limiting by nature. And the lawyers would have a field day trying to interpret every word of that definition. So all we said is, if it is in Schedule 7, it is CSR. And Schedule 7 actually is a list of activities, generic in nature. So there's education, poverty reduction, health, women's empowerment, skill development. All of those are there in the 14 items under Schedule 7. So if you undertake any of activities in that domain, then you are in the realm of CSR.
So how does a company, coming to that, now we're talking strategic CSR. Now a company, the board clearly says, and like you rightly said, that our job is not to do welfare. There are 14 items listed in the Schedule 7, Section 135. How do I choose which item I should take up? What is the process or methodology that this Indian CSR legislation provides me to make my life easy as a business?
So let's say it's not just strategic but practical.
Doable, sir.
The realm of doable.
Okay, let me try and answer this in two ways. One is, I worked as CEOs of foundations which are promoter driven. Okay? And there are those which are non-promoter driven.
Still are, Vedanta.
That's what I'm talking about.
No, he's ex-Vedanta.
I have finally become my own man now.
Okay.
When it is promoter driven, there are many items which they think of as important, not to themselves as a family, but also important for their business. Okay? Let's say, for example, in this particular unnamed foundation of which I was the CEO, the family had a very strong interest in animal welfare. And most companies don't do that. But because the promoter's daughter was extremely into that, we actually had a fair amount of percentage of our spending in animal welfare. This is one way that CSR is looked at. Then we said, all right, we have these manufacturing units, 6 of them all over India. Now we need to help out with the people around our manufacturing bases. So how can we improve their lives? What do they need? And we carried out a large number of surveys to assess what do they need? What does the community want? And therefore, for us, manufacturing, and connecting with the community around us was essential. And basically, from year to year, we would assess what is it that they want and what is it that we can do for them. This was point 2. Point 3, sometimes there is a passion in one area. In this particular case, the chairman of the company had this very great idea. Nobody should go hungry to bed. So, countering hunger, and then he specified and he said, that's a huge agenda for a country like India. So can we say, no child should go hungry to bed? And so we had this vast nutrition program. We took Anganwadis from the government, completely redid it, beautified it, added new dimensions to it, and then returned it back to government. So that program then became, a flagship program for us. So there are many ways in which companies strategize, they think through, and they understand that this is where we will get maximum value, generally speaking, to our company, and also enhance our brand name in the process.
So I'll come to, you use this word value. And for me, again, sticking to the triangle or the triad, I think the Indian CSR models, having studied it for over a decade, for me there are 3 V's. One is what you said, sir, values. And I think, all companies keep telling us, we want to be like the Tatas, right? So one is, sir, the values. Second, you spoke about value. And today, sir, when you met another father of CSR, Porter, and you could tell us a little bit about all the Michael Porter, so you actually went and met him, and he actually came up with this seminal concept called creating shared value, which today is being used in sustainability. And the third, sir, which you also mentioned about, is valuation. So how is this 3V tricone look like? Do you think it is still relevant today? Value, values, valuation for a business, because everybody in this room belongs to business.
No, not really.
Mostly. Or stakeholders of business.
Exceptions prove the rule.
It's like a Pakistani batsman facing Kuldeep Yadav. I mean, he's throwing googlies at me, so I need to be able to play them with as straight a bat as I can. And the other problem is there are questions, and then there are something known as loaded questions. And this is much preloaded kind of thing, right? So value, all right? We'll take the 3 V's. Value. Now, value without the S, values part comes. So what is the value that we derive from a CSR project? What does a well-executed CSR project bring as value to the company? And I think there are 2 levels for this. One value, of course, is the pure satisfaction, the human satisfaction of the team, the company, which did that work on the field. And it felt really good as a human enterprise, because at the end of the day, what are companies? They are a conglomeration of human beings. And you feel the value of a really well-executed CSR project. Immense value. Second value, of course, is the brand value. That by doing so, you enhance the perception of the company as something special, something good. Values with an S. I think, however much you want it, the best corporates always talk about values. In fact, when you talk of mission and vision, no company ever puts its mission and vision up there without values being a part of that mission and vision. Right or wrong?
Invariably.
Right? Whether they stick to them or not may well be another context. But yes, if a company is derived or deprived of values, it dies. So for me, values is important. Valuation, not commercial valuation, not monetary valuation, but evaluation. Because when you have done a CSR project on the ground, you must be able to understand how much has it changed the lives of those beneficiaries for whom that project was intended. You spoke rightly of a school, the transformation that you want to bring among the teachers, among the students, among the parents. What do they feel about what you did? And they will evaluate, or valuation which will be ascribed to that will be in the minds of all the stakeholders there. So that's my 3B approach.
I'll come next, sir, to this whole CSR. You said, and let's come to Chatterjeeisms. So, you have actually today coined these Chatterjeeisms, which I know everybody comes to listen to them, and every time I come up with a new Chatterjeeism. So, what is your Chatterjeeism for the launch of this very historic event?
Well, today I'll put this like this. When I was conceptualizing the idea of CSR, I always felt that there's something on which this entire idea will falter. It will break. It will not be able to sustain itself. What's the weak link in this chain that I am thinking about in my mind? As a policy maker, you hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst. If it doesn't work, it's a failed, something I've imposed on the private sector. Imagine my conscience. All of this, I've brought legislation, and the whole damn thing, poof, it's gone. The secret of all this had to be the bridging of the trust deficit between what NGOs said about the private sector. क्या बोले वो? अरे चटर्जी साहब, ये लोग सब जो हैं मुनाफा खोरी हैं, इनको डेवलपमेंट में क्या लेना देना, पैसे बनाओ पैसे ले जाओ, ये इनकी मनोवृत्ति है। तो इनको आप क्या करोगे? ऐसे लॉ लाओ जिनसे they must be mandated to do. This was the perception of the NGOs. कॉर्पोरेट्स के पास जब हम गए, सर आप पागल हो गए हो, हमने पैसे किसको देने हैं? ये चप्पल और झोले वाले को? सर इनका तो साइन यहां लग गया तो एनजीओ बन गया, वही साइन उठा के वहां लगा दिया तो दूसरा एनजीओ बन गया, इनको पैसे देने सर? Now imagine that the perception of one of the other was as bad as could be. But if this trust deficit were to continue, the whole experiment would fail. And today, therefore, the Chatterjeeism that you're talking about is something that has been validated now over these 10 years. And it is called corporatization of NGOs and NGOization of corporates. Reason. NGOs have begun to understand what the corporate language is. When you make a proposal for a corporate entity, how do you make that proposal? It can't be the old NGO way of kuch bhi bana diya aur bhej diya. Corporates have a certain way of actually evaluating a proposal. Can you talk that language?
Right.
If you cannot, your proposal will get nixed right at the beginning. Corporate entities, we in the boardroom are now understanding कौन से प्रोजेक्ट्स को हम लें इस साल, कौन हमें बताएगा, रूटीन चीजें तो हम कर डालें. What are the fresh ideas and from whom can we derive them? And then we talk to our implementing agencies, we invite them to the boardroom and we ask them, tell us, you're the ones who are working there in the community, you're the ones who are slogging night and day, you feel the pulse of poverty-stricken India. Tell us, this was our annual action plan last year, what can we do better? Which of these should we continue? Which should we terminate? Can you give us some fresh ideas? What will strengthen you? Why has that dialogue begun? Why are we asking NGO? If this were not to happen over these 10 years, the experiment would have collapsed. Because that trust deficit has reduced visibly, it will reduce even further. I think CSR has been such an outstanding success.
Yeah. Coming back to the today was the launch of the CSR and Sustainability Sector Committee. Does the father of CSR think that today, after 10 years, CSR is a sector, CSR is a market? What is CSR? You said there's no definition. And therefore, what constitutes it being a sector? Because if you're calling it a sector committee, people here should first be convinced that yes, CSR needs to be taken seriously. It's not meant to be a googly, sir.
No, I'm just thinking because I don't want to give a pat answer.
Sorry, to help you, what I said earlier, when we looked at it 2 years back, 22 corporates in our membership immediately jumped and enrolled themselves that we want to be part of the sector committee. So that was the level of interest, 22 big companies. But when it came to actually implementing it, it faltered.
No, I'm very glad to provide whatever little leadership I can and to build as much traction within the EBG as I can provide. But when you talk of a sector, and this is important, even over these last 2 years, what has happened? When we began our whole CSR journey, back of the envelope told us, and it was, of course, actualized in first 2014-15 that year, there were about 8,000 companies. And the total expenditure was about 9,000 crores. Last year's figures, 23-24, tell us that there are 28,000 companies. The expenditure is 36,000 crores. It has grown exponentially to become a sector of our economy.
Let alone the EBG sector.
Literally. And this is my dream, that by the time the SDGs are over, which is 2030, what is our spending likely to be? 50,000 crores. And therefore, CSR today is virtually a sector of our economy. And why so? Not only because of the spending, but because of the kind of livelihoods that many individuals and NGOs and trusts and companies are deriving. People's lives are now driven by CSR. They survive because CSR is there. They built their whole lives on CSR. And also because in the CSR space, lots of research in academic institutions are happening. A lot of people are researching. The whole community of researchers are now into CSR because for the first time, we have data. No country in the world has CSR data. If you ask Mr. Trump, how much money was spent on CSR by the US last year, what would he say? We can ask Biden, we can ask Obama, but the reply will be the same.
Why not Trump?
We have no, I'm saying, we can ask Trump also. What would the reply be? We have no idea. So I'll finish with this last part you asked about.
CSR a sector.
No. You asked about Harvard.
Harvard.
So when I went to meet Michael Porter, and this was when I was still trying to draft the legislation. This was around 2011 or so. And he was then the god of business strategy. And he had just authored this brilliant article, Porter and Kramer, which he called Shared Value. And in that paper, from which I drew a lot of inspiration, was that companies should do projects which of course give them profits, but also benefits those who are involved in that project. for example, one of the examples quoted there was Jain irrigation in India. And they had a huge agriculture project from which they were deriving profits. But because of that, the farmers who were in that project, also their lives, the quality of their lives, increased substantially in a measurable way. So Porter's proposition was that companies can do a lot of good for communities, in the process of which they certainly earn profits, but the value is shared. That means the agriculturists, the farmers who were involved in that project, also improved the quality of their lives. So it became shared value both for the company itself and for the people who were involved in the project. And to me, it sounded like it's a good proposition. But I realized the limitations of such things. How many projects like this can you think of? How many companies would want to do such projects? If there is something to which we can elevate it, bring in some amount of legislation. So I went to meet Mr. Porter at Harvard, and he had assigned 15 minutes to that meeting. And this lady, I still remember her name, Betty. Betty was around late 30s. She was the private secretary. She ushered me in, and we sat down, and this conversation began. So we started talking. He explained his concept. I talked about what we were thinking for India and so on. And exactly at the 15th minute, Betty walks in and she says, "Thank you very much, Dr. Chatterjee. It's been such a pleasure," which basically meant the meeting was at an end. So I was about to get up. This is what Porter did. So Betty moved out of the room, and we continued the conversation. And he said, "You know, Dr. Chatterjee, he says, I find this fascinating. Can you really do this in India?" And again, we went on and on. So 15 minutes later, Betty walks in again, and he again does the same gesture. And he says, "Please don't walk in again." So we sit and we chat. And he examines the basics. He asked me about corporates, how much would they be interested, would they buy in, if you were to bring a legislation, can it be done in India or not? And he said, "Look, let me be very clear. In America, we can never dream of this. We are a corporate-driven country. We cannot legislate for corporate." And so at the end of about an hour and 15 or whatever, we were walking. He escorted me right to the lift. When we had pressed the button and the lift came, he said to me, "Dr. Chatterjee, whatever you do, please do not legislate." So I get into the lift, and what's my first thought? Whatever you may say, Professor Porter, I will legislate. And that's the short story of my meeting with Michael Porter.
Coming back to the institutionalization part of it, because what EBG has done under Ramanji's leadership.
Let's make that the last question.
Yes, we are.
In fact, we can move around, we can interact
Yeah.
more.
Let's have it from this.
Absolutely. So we are winding up with this last question, and then we'll actually open the floor for only 3 questions, because remember, today is all about 3s. Not yet, sir, but yeah, the last one. We'll come to it. So coming last question to the institutionalization, that's what you did. A lot of corporates said, "What's the big deal?" That Dr. Chatterjee and that DP, a lot of PSUs said, "What's the big deal with 2010? We have always been doing CSR." So what was that model of pre-legislation CSR? What has changed today? And where do you see today, there's a lot of talk among business leaders that CSR is dead. 10 years is over. Dr. Chatterjee's Trikon is irrelevant. Dr. Chatterjee is irrelevant. But today, sir, and I want to bring that in, and I want to use this opportunity to also, many congratulations, sir. You have been made the chairman of the first ever national sustainability reporting standards under the government of India. So today you are also the father of sustainability. So where do you see this continuum, sir? What has changed, and what does it look like for the next 10 years for India and the global south as far as CSR is concerned? We'll stick to India. And as the chair of this historic sector committee, what is your roadmap? Where do you see all these people in the room fit into this larger Bharatiya agenda of Viksit Bharat, as well as to the larger SDG agenda of 2030?
The answer will be half the length of this question. Because his questions are so involved.
They are also loaded.
Yeah, they're also loaded. No, I'll just say this, that I am truly committed to this sector committee. My appeal to all of you who have turned up today and to all those who have not is that this sector committee, and hopefully whatever publications we make, will involve every one of you. Your thoughts, your ideas, your views, and the state of the CSR generally amongst our company.
And if I may say, this, don't go by the number of people here, the interest is much bigger, and we will do whatever we can in EBG to propagate what we have done today in terms of the launch and taking it forward under your chairmanship.
Thank you, Raman sir. Thank you ever so much. And the second part is answered in one sentence. For CSR now to evolve, the connection between CSR and sustainability, whether it's ESG or whatever else you want to say, needs to be established more and more. As I sit on the chairman of the CSR committees of many companies, what's been happening is that these committees have now been designated as CSR and Sustainability Committee. Many of the cards I get from CSR heads is head CSR and sustainability. So they are being spoken together as a, in tandem.
Interestingly, companies like Coca-Cola, they actually brought it in sustainability 4 years back.
Correct, and rightly so, because there was an international compulsion on them. So these two are now integrating in a very big way, and the future, I think, lies there.
Three questions, and then we.
Oh, you didn't get up, sir, please. Okay.
Mr. Raman sir, Mr. Verma, Mr. Chatterjee. I think as a one-man army, I would like to give you a standing ovation. You can all get up and give a standing ovation.
Yeah.
Great. Great. Sarma, I'd like to ask you a question, sir. Yes, Sarma, now ask. Please, great. I'll start with CSR. 3 words. The Army, the Navy, the Air Force. A simple question. CSR for the Defense Forces. That's the question which I'm asking you, sir. Number 1. Number 2, I have been in the Kargil War. That's as a brigadier. As a 3-star general, I've been the Vice Chancellor of the Military College of EME. And I have been the DG EME later. After this retirement from the DGME's post, I've been in 5 companies as an independent director, all PSUs. I've also been a member of the Environment Committee in the first term. I've been through the Central Business Commission as an independent external monitor for 2 companies. And I'm still serving in UFlex as an independent director and Foodflex. I say this with all my experience in the boards, that what you've spoken is something very unique, and that's why I've got up and thank you. Thank you, Mr. Raman, for doing this, and Mr. Verma and Rohan. God bless you for taking the fire chat. Now, sir, the question is what you said from the thing to the boardrooms is most important. And I've seen all the lists, and generally they talk education for the soldiers, for the battle people, the widows, Veer Naris. And I question them, why don't you employ these people? So the question which I'm asking to you, sir, CSR for the defense forces. You talked about corporates, and how do you see CSR for the defense forces is the question which I'm asking you as a simple question. And I have enough experience on CSR in the boardroom, as I've said. I'll give you my cards also, that's one. Thank you.
So if I can rephrase that, at the end of the day, it's the corporates who are in the CSR, but he's trying to say what do they do for the army or defense force.
The journalists say, ye karna, wo karna, but they're doing anything, nothing.
That's like succinct answer to that, and then we can move on.
No, there are many NGOs who are actually doing a lot of work with armed forces. Okay. So not only just education, something to answer your particular question about employment. Now, you need to make people employable. Maybe corporates can't just say, all right, come on board and we'll employ you. But we can make them employable. And for example, Reacha is one NGO working very strongly in Kashmir. And they are working with ONGC, rather BSE. And they are doing a lot of skill development for our Jawans there, for a lot of the community around there, integrating and taking advice from the army station there. All this can only happen in collaboration. So they go out and ask them, what can we do for you? What would you want us to do for you?
I agree. So I've been a part of the Kargil War in 15 Corps, and we created something called Ops Sadbhavna, to win the hearts of these people. And we got them. I was the director, the first director there. We did it. But what I'm trying to say, CSR, 3 words for the defense forces, nothing much. You have to do something more. And I have enough experience of these 5-6 companies which I have. They say, we'll do this, we'll do this.
So we got your point.
But it's okay. I'm just stressing this point because everything is about corporates. Why don't we have some money from the corporates given to the defense forces?
Got your point,
That's
sir.
all.
Got
Thank you,
your
Mr.
point.
Raman.
Got your point. Sir.
Yeah, Mr. Chatterjee, thank you very much for your valuable insights. It's not a question per se which I want to ask, but I am a corporate and I'm also a trustee of a NGO. So sometimes I am in a giver position and sometimes I am in a taker position. Okay, and we are working in the tribal areas of Maharashtra for last 25 years for child mortality and malnutrition reduction. As you said, there are now 28,000 companies almost, and 36,000 crore is being spent.
Going up to 50.
Yeah, and now what's happening is that you have a legislation where if your turnover is 50 crores or your profit is more than 5 crores, you come into that net. And not everybody is Tatas or Ambanis or who can really afford to have eminent consultants like you who really guide them. But there are very small companies who are in this net and who want to do this. And I'm sure in this EBG net also, not every company is so big, but they will definitely fall into this category of 50 crores and 5 crores. And what I have seen is that many times corporates and both NGOs forget the spirit and essence of it. They just give the money and they want something to be seen, and that really doesn't work for the beneficiaries. So my request, or what I would say, that what I would like to see as this EBG sector committee, that you really play a role in getting these two areas together and enlighten our members to really spend for the cause and not just because they have to spend it. So this is what I would say.
And in context, he is the CEO of a major Austrian company over in the railway sector. And they are
Very
going
nice.
under
Thank
the
you.
under the Atmanirbhar thing. They're setting up a factory now in the country.
Right? No, point very well taken. That's what we really need to do.
Yes.
Okay, last. Yes, please.
I'm Varun from MasterCard.
Hi, Varun.
I just wanted to share that Dr. Chatterjee spoke of NGOs. So one of the things that we've also learned is that for-profit social enterprises have worked very well in our scenario. One example is Hak Darshak. We started working with them recently, and everyone in CSR, the focus has been on let's collaborate with NGOs. And like sir, I'm also a trustee for another foundation that I founded while working at MasterCard. but then, for-profit enterprises have actually driven that more. So I just want to understand that, is there also a focus of this committee and otherwise to actually educate more and more corporates around that for-profit social enterprises can also do the good job when it comes to CSR and sustainability?
You won't believe this, but when I first wrote much of the rules under Section 135, I also believed that profit is not a dirty word. Profit drives efficiency.
Yeah.
So could we also bring the organizations that you speak about, which are social organizations, but they are for-profit.
Right.
So initially the law had brought them within the ambit. But when we went to the legislators, they said, "Nahi, profit is pe mat rakhiye, we won't be able to sell it." So that's why we removed, and it's still in the phase where somehow, when you're doing good for a community, the word profit deters, somewhere in the Indian context or the Indian psyche, that still persists. And then because it is not there in the law, not there in the rules, corporates, unless they really want to do something special, they don't buy into that so much. But I agree with you that somewhere along the way, at least I see it in the future, that for-profit social enterprises will also come into the ambit. It has to.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, we must talk about it, definitely, and why not? In fact, in the sector committee report also, if you can give us a little bit of help on that, we'd like to have a para or two on what we could do.
We are releasing it in 19th of November.
Well, I don't know whether I can put it together that quickly, but we'll see
At
what
least
we
it's
can
a
do.
position paper.
At least, yeah.
I'll be happy to support on that.
Please, that'll be
Thank you.
nice. All right. Thank you.
Can I say something?
You want to ask something, Swani? Yeah.
No,
You
just-
have to give the lady the last word. Yeah, please.
Literally last, because let's move around,
Yeah, yeah.
otherwise it's been 2.5 hours since we
First of
started.
all, thank you so much, sir, and Rohan and sir, for organizing this. Sir, mental health in India is a topic that is not discussed in terms of CSR. So India, as we know, is facing a mental health crisis. 60% of the employees, corporate employees, are facing some mental health disorder, and it's costing our economy about $1.3 trillion. So, what is your take, sir, that why the CSR spending in this sector is particularly very low, and what can be done to exacerbate that?
Dr. Suhani, the recognition of mental health as a problem or something that is staring us in the face in the workspace is a realization that has dawned on us very lately. Sanjay would recall that in the corporate sector, it is only after we found that employees in Deloitte were committing suicide, and they left suicide notes talking about the kind of harshness that they had to face in terms of the work pressure that was put on them. And those 3 or 4 suicides in different consulting agencies particularly brought to fore the fact that it's there, and yet we're not seeing it. Only when something extreme happens that you sit up and take notice. But over the last 3 years, I see a lot of talk, understanding, as you rightly said, discussions happening at workplaces. In Deloitte, for example, where I also I work as an advisor, we've sent out, now bosses have become accountable for the mental health of their juniors. If a junior complains that, I got a mail at such and such time and he asked me to do this like yesterday, he or she can officially complain. So I think we are on the right track, but CSR has to do more in that space. So some element of advocacy, some element of awareness, only then can we bring it to the conscience of the decision makers at the board level. But thank you for putting that in.
Right, with that, I think we've had a very, very great discussion. We've co-created ideas, we've co-created solutions. This is just the beginning of, this whole CSR and Sustainability Sector Committee. With this, I think we are all today not just participants in this setup, but we are all part of history. And Ramanji, you will always go down in history as the leader, and of course the board is here. Thank you all, the board members of EBG, we are so grateful to the board of EBG, also those members who are not able to join us today.
Let us propagate this.
Absolutely. So, and I think now that the ownership is with each of us, and to end, I think today's, and I'll just take 1 minute to summarize. I think we thank you so much for your, your discourse on CBAM. But what we discussed after CBAM was CBAM, BALM, on how CSR can also be a balm, right? So today we spoke of CBAM and CBAM. With that, also, we spoke of triangles, we spoke of 3, but remember the reason I have these 2 is because we're talking of CSR and sustainability. And therefore, we will end with only 2 possibilities, as Ramanji said, to go back to what the leader said. We need to think of what is doable. We've spoken a lot, yesterday, and I want to, raise a tribute and salute our armed forces. Yesterday, after the match in Pakistan, both Shubman and, Abhishek said, enough of talking, we showed through results. So today, it's time for us to actually take this conversation forward with results. And with that, we have 2 possibilities. Either you do it or you don't.
So let's rise to that.
Let's rise to that, and the conversation continues over drinks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rohan. Thank you, Rohan. We are going with the felicitation of votes. I would like to invite Bhaskar Sharma, who's a member of